All right, so let me share the screen here. Oh, Yufei, can you enable screen share?
Yes, you can do it right now.
Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so let's give me 1 second. Okay, so hello everybody. My name is Yufei Huang. I'm a professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering here at UTSA, and I hold also a joint position in the Department of Population Health Science at the University of Texas Health at San Antonio. So I'm going to talk about how to conduct research today. Okay. So it's a pretty broad topic. I'm going to use this paper as an example to really illustrate some of the concepts I'm going to talk about today. So as you can see, this is a joint work between Dr. Yufei Huang and myself, and also some other researchers over at UT Health, San Antonio. So the first author is Ricardo Ramirez, who is also one of the mentors in this REU. So I think this paper is pretty relevant to this activity here. All right, so so let me start by, before I get into the details, I just want everybody to know that this is should be a quite interactive process, so that feel free to ask me questions if you have, right? It's not just I make presentations. So I want to, such that we can interact. I can answer some of your questions, and I can really see some of your questions, and so that I can help answer some of the questions, right? So feel free to ask questions, interrupt me anytime you have any questions. So let's start by looking at this question about what research really is, right? So by Oxford definition, so research is the systematic investigation into the study and material. Oh, sorry, let me get back up. So it's the systematic investigation into the study of materials and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. So we can see that in this definition, there are two sets of action terms: investigation, study, and establish and reach. And there are also two sets of subjects, which are materials and resources, and facts and new conclusions. So I think these action terms are easy for you to understand: investigation, study, establish, reach. But it's what are a little bit fuzzy are these subjects. So I want to get into these subjects in a little bit more details. So first of all, what are the materials and resources, right? And so material resources are very much data. So using, again, this paper as an example. So the paper concerns performing a so-called cancer diagnosis, or being able to predict the type of a cancer from the so-called gene expression data. So you don't have to worry about what gene expression is. It's just to know that it's some sort of a measurement of a human. Okay, so that reflects the state of a human health. Okay, so we take the gene expression data and we want to predict the type of cancer. So in this particular case, the material and sources that we want to investigate and study are gene expression, particularly, right? So in addition to this data that we use to reach prediction, the material and resource also includes the past literatures. So that we know the state of art. So we know what are the different conclusions that have already been drawn in the past. So now the second subject, the facts. So the facts in this case is established, right? So what are the facts that are established? Okay, so in again, coming back to this example here, the facts that we established are or is a new algorithm, and particularly based on the so-called graph convolution neural network. Okay, so I want to point out that in scientific studies, so when I say scientific study, I really mean the area of study that concerns, for example, biology, physics, this type of a science-related studies. The facts can be different from what we are used to or accustomed to in engineering. So here, for example, we talk about facts being a new algorithm, but in scientific areas, the facts are often new discoveries. Okay, so I want to point out the differences between the engineering type of study and scientific study, and the difference in the concept of facts. Okay, so for engineering, we're more we're builders, right? We're building new algorithms, we're building new systems. So therefore, the facts concerns new algorithms, new systems. Whereas
È serio, mamma la tossì,
sorry,
mamma la
you have a question here?
Excuse me, please mute yourself if you don't have questions.
Anybody has? Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Good. All right. So yeah, the point I want to talk about is that when it comes to facts, there's a difference between the engineering area of study and scientific area of study, so that you know, right? So and then the last subject is called conclusions. So this is very much after we review the facts, what kind of a conclusion we draw, right? So in this example, the conclusion that we draw is that this new algorithm based on GCN improves the prediction accuracy. So for scientific studies, the conclusion can be that this research established or a new discovery. Okay, so potentially a new molecular mechanism or biomarkers for certain cancers, for example. Okay, all right. So this is a quick intro about what research is. So the next question will be, why do we do research? Okay, so we do research because there's a need. Okay, so there's a need for, first of all, to address problems that concern society, concerns the economy of the world, environment, and human health. So secondly, there's a need to really improve the tools and or establish new tools to address these societal economic questions. And then the reason we do research is because we want to advance our knowledge about the biological systems, about the social problems, about the environmental questions. So, and lastly, we do research. From a humor perspective, we do research it's really for fun. So there's a lot of fun that involves research. So research itself is also hard. And human has this tendency and the urge to really to address, to really conquer hard problems, right? And from which we gain fun. Okay, so yeah, really, one of our last reason for doing research is really because it's fun. So now, what is the process that we follow to conduct research? So I listed 8 steps. Okay, so they pretty much cover most of the processes that regardless whether you're conducting a engineering research or conducting a scientific research. However, when it comes to some of the detailed research, some of these steps can be swapped, but in general, these are the main steps. So, and the process of research starts from identifying a topic and their associated problems. Okay, and then afterwards, we need to know the state of the art and know the challenges that are associated with these topics and the problems. And afterwards, we need to collect data, okay? And based on which we formulate the problem so when I say formulate a problem, so this is very much using specific to machine learning and AI, we need to use math to translate the problems that are normally described in English into math, so that we can use mathematical tools to really address these problems. Okay, so once we formulate the problems, and then we have to come up with so-called hypotheses. So in engineering, we don't use hypothesis to describe what we propose. Oftentimes, we propose methods. So the reason I still phrase this step as a proposed hypothesis is because this is quite common to scientific studies. So you propose different hypotheses for you to test. Whereas in our case, for engineering, we propose methods. Okay. So once we propose methods, the next step is to take the data and we use the proposed methods, and we establish and test these methods, which oftentimes involve computer programming and evaluation of your programs, and take the data and test your results, and so on and so forth. And afterwards, we draw conclusions to see whether your proposed methods are effective and meet what you expected to see. And if it doesn't meet, and then we oftentimes will have to go back to step 5 to revise the approaches, to revise the methods, and then follow through to establish the method and test methods again. So until that we're confident to draw the conclusion such that the methods really meets our expectation and the method is good. And then afterwards, we will gather all the results and then start writing the paper, okay, and submit to the journals and hopefully get it accepted. So that's more or less a quick overview of the steps. So let me get into the details of each one of the steps, okay. So the first step is to identify the topic or the topics and the related problems. So this is, in fact, to me, the most difficult step among within this process. Okay, so for you guys who are in this REU program, you are pretty much saved from getting to this process of identify topics. So the topics that you will be researching are very much identified. Okay, the reason is that, as I said, this is a pretty difficult process. Oftentimes involves a prolonged research of a extensive literature. So we probably don't have that time within this 10-week time period for you to conduct this part of engage in this part of the process. However, I want to still quickly get into what is required for us to identify topics and problems. Right? So first of all, you have to really assess what your expertise is and what your interests are. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. All right. So yeah, please mute yourself if you don't have any questions, right? All right. So I want to say you want to start by really asking yourself, what is your expertise, right? For us, we're electrical engineers, all computer scientists, right? So we're trained with this type of knowledge. So it's probably very hard for us to directly get into biology or social science, right? So therefore, it's probably hard for you to directly get into a topic that involving social science or biology and so on and so forth. Secondly, you really have to ask yourself whether, working on a biological question of a problem is aligned aligns with your interest, right? So this is very much the first question or first sets of questions you have to ask yourself. Okay, and after you identify what you want to work on, right? This could be a bigger area. You know, I want to work on addressing health, right? Or I want to work on solving the environmental issues, and then you need to really look at this bigger area and come down and identify some specific topics. Okay, to achieve that, you need to know the state of the art. Okay, what are the urgent, emerging problems, or what are the cutting edge problems in this particular area, right? Public health, for example, right? To do that, you need to read. You need to read lots and lots of papers, literatures, and then afterwards, you have to really think. Okay, you have to gather all the papers that you read, sort of start to categorize, start to clustering, these different topics that you can extract from these papers you read, right? And start to identify some of the problems that you see that will have a higher impact, right? That many people are interested in, right? So this is a pretty complicated process, requires multiple rounds of cycling, right? You read lots and lots of papers, and then you identify some of the subtopics. You see which one is more important than others, and you come down to these subtopics. You keep on reading, right? You maybe identify a few subtopic under the subtopics, right? And then finally, hopefully, you can really nail down to a set of specific coherent problems under a unified topic that have a bigger impact. Okay, so and then afterwards, you want to look at this problem, you identify, come up with a comprehensive plan as to how you are going to first of all identify these problems, to be clear about what the problems that you try to address, right? And then come up with this comprehensive plan about how you are going to go about addressing these problems, right? What kind of data you are going to collect, and what are potential problems, approaches that you are going to really deploy, and what are their pros and cons, okay? And then the timeline that it takes for you to really address each one of the problems, and the resource and the effort that requires for you to, for example, collect data and develop these different problems. Okay, so yeah, as you can see, this is a pretty involved process, right? Requires really a lot of these back and forth, and lots of reading into the literatures, and a lot of thinking, a lot of simulations in your mind about what will be the impact, whether it's feasible to take this approach using this data to really address that question, whether that question is addressable with this limited resource or with this amount of resource in this proposed timeline, right? So overall, it's a pretty complicated process, but if you can, but it's a crucial process that really defines the impact of your research, and whether this set of problems can be solved, right? All right, so this is the first problem, first step. So once you identify the problem, and then you need to know the state of the art and knowing the challenges for addressing these problems, okay? To really know this, to know the state of the art and the challenges. So once again, you have to read literatures to know the pros and cons of existing solutions, okay? So, and I'm taking this paper as an example, right? So oftentimes we read a paper, the first part of the paper is introduction. So the introduction will really tell you what are the state-of-art approaches. Okay, so here, if you look at the paper, so I highlight the sections where the discussions of a state-of-art is listed, and then you will also see the challenges. So specific to this work, the challenges is that the gene expression data are inherently unstructured, right? But most of the existing approaches, the models, the methods that have been developed in the existing literature models to structure the data. So therefore, how can one develop a model that model this type of unstructured data is really a challenge. Okay, so this is what this particular research problem is set to address. Okay, so once you identify the challenges and know the state of the art, so the next step is to let me back up. The next step is to really collect data. Okay, so here we want to predict cancer based on the so-called gene expression data. Right? So you have to really see where you can get the gene expression data. So there are a couple of resources. So these days, there are multiple public resources that deposit this type of data. So this is something that you can start by looking at, right? Looking for public resources for these type of data. Or if you find that there's not enough public resources, or there's no public resources that provides sufficient data for you to carry out this, to achieve this particular goal, then you have to plan for generating your own data. Okay? So luckily, in our case, so National Cancer Institute, or which is a sub-institute under National Institute for Health, has put up this tremendous effort to really collect data and release to the public. And this particular effort is called the Cancer Genome Atlas program, or TCG program. So this program really provides the gene expression data from cancer patients, from a large collection of cancer patients, over 10,000 patients. So we're lucky enough in this case to have thousands of samples, gene expression samples, from a variety of cancer types, cancer patients. Specifically, in this case, we have these gene expression samples were taken from 33 different cancer patients. So here is a chart that you can also see in the paper that summarize the different cancer types and different number of samples. All right, so once we collect the data, so the next step is to formulate the problem. So this step concerns translating the problems described in English into math. Okay. So the reason why we need this step is because all these machine learning theories, tools, are developed by using mathematical languages and based on mathematical theories. So therefore, we need to translate the problem into math, such that you know whether this is for example, a supervised learning problem or an unsupervised learning problem, or whether you should deploy a generative model or a descriptive model. So only until we can translate the problem into math can we know which machine learning tools or theories we should use to really address this problem. So therefore, this is a really very important step of the entire process. So after we formulate the problem, and then you can think about proposing new methods. Okay? So you can propose multiple methods. So the reason here is you might not be completely sure whether one method is going to be the best solution, right? In this case, you can propose multiple methods based on some of your hypotheses, and then
There's a YouTube channel today we're covering many educator.
whether one of the methods is better than others, right? So in our case,
So for instance,
can you mute your mic? There's a lot of background noise.
we have paired up. It's fairly simple. It's important to note beforehand, before we do this,
So one
this
of
is
you-
a new
I think somebody
educator.
is unmute. Can you mute yourself?
Okay, thank you. Okay, so in our case, as I said, the challenge is that the existing approaches, methods, doesn't really model the unstructured data. And we see that GCN, the Graph Convolution Neural Network, is a model that specifically proposed to model unstructured data. So we have that hypothesis that GCNN can model unstructured gene expression data, therefore resulting in improved prediction accuracy. So as a result, we focus on only one method, or this GCNN model. Okay. So once we propose this new method or a method, and then the next step is to really establish this method and test the method. Okay. So this step involves programming, specific for if you're conducting AI research, right? So a lot of Python programming, possibly also MATLAB programming, R programming. So after you program, and then we need to test the method on the data sets that we collected, right? And to evaluate the performance. So evaluation of performance concerns these evaluation metrics, which can be, in this case, accuracy, precision recall, ROC curve, error under the curve, so on and so forth. Okay, so what you see here on the screen on the left side is the pseudocode that RJ established for establish this method, and on the right side you see the performances of these approaches under different conditions, under different test data sets, and these performances are in the form of accuracy and plus or minus standard deviation of the test accuracy. Okay. All right. So once you have these test results, and then you want to see and you want to compare with existing approaches, and to see whether, for example, in this case, the GCN improves the performance of existing algorithms, right? So, and if it does, and then we're pretty happy, we move on to write a paper. So if it doesn't, then you have to go back and then look at this particular approach or method that you deployed, and then ask, what exactly is the issue, whether there's a way for you to improve the methods, and then possibly come up with a new methods, establish it, and then test it again, right? So, or in other words, once we reach this step, you either draw a conclusion to support your hypothesis, or to support that the method is good, or you go back and refine your methods, okay, until you can confidently say that you have a new approach, and then you stop, okay. So here, luckily that, well, I wouldn't say luckily, this is definitely a multiple cycle of this process, but in the end, we're able to report that this GCN model that we established is able to produce a better accuracy when compared with other approaches. Okay, so and then once you reach that step, and then you can start writing a paper. So writing a paper is also a pretty long and pretty long and involved process. Okay, so I just want to give you a quick idea as to what it takes to write a paper. So we need to start by having a draft. So there are some common logistic that we follow in writing a paper, and And there's also a more or less a structured format that we follow to write this type of engineering or scientific papers. Okay, so once we have the draft, and then we revise, right? We pass on to all the co-authors, and everybody gave their critiques, and then we revise the paper. So after we finalize the paper by incorporating all the critiques, and then we submit to a journal. Okay. So once we submit to the journal, and the process, we pretty much wait, right? Wait for what? Wait for the journal to start the reviewing process. And then this reviewing process can be really long, right? But now many journals have policies to try to expedite the review process, or to be able to review your paper in a reasonable timeline. So normally, in about 3 to 6 months, you should be able to hear back from the journal about the result of the review. So the first review, the outcome will be either directly reject, which will be pretty unlucky for you, or it will be it will ask you to revise based on the comments from the reviewers. Okay, so this is the most likely outcome for any paper review. However, if you're lucky enough, if your paper is of really high quality, and the paper can be directly accepted after just one round of a review, but this is really rare. Okay, in most cases, you will ask to revise the paper and to address some of the reviewer comments. Okay, so and then you look at the reviewer comments, you address them, you improve your paper, you write a pretty lengthy response in most of the time to really tell the reviewer how you address their comments, or how you what exactly you did in response to their comments, right? And you resubmit your revised paper to the journal, and you wait for the decision again. Okay, so and in most likely in the second round of review, you will only given a chance you will only hear your paper being either reject or accept. So if you're lucky enough, and if you carefully address the reviewer comments in the first round of review, most likely your paper will be accepted. However, in many cases, and it's very custom to us as a researcher to really experience paper being rejected. Okay, so this is really an unfortunate scenario, but like I said, we're very much used to this. So we in those cases, we have to really accept the reality and really think hard about what exactly, take the reverse comments to heart and see how we can really further improve the paper, and move on to submit probably to another journal. Okay, so that's pretty much the process of a research, right? But overall, a research can be a pretty lengthy process. It has up and downs, but overall, I would say it's a really fun experience. Okay, and if you really like research, it's a really rewarding process. So I hope you experience some of these up and downs in the next 10 weeks and really finds fun in the research. So finally, happy research in the next 10 weeks. And I want to see whether you have any questions.
Yes, I have one question.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Oh, yeah. I think for a new researcher, always struggle to find relevant information. Is it, do you have any advice you can give me or give us? Because sometimes all information looks relevant, but at the end you realize now some information you can discard them and won't affect the result of your And in the meantime, you've wasted time. So is there any advice you can give us?
Okay, so the question here is, how can we find relevant information about your research topic, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so yeah, this is a very good question. It's a very important question, right? So luckily these days, because of the internet, you have access to many resources where you can find useful information. So the first resource I will say is Google. So you want to always Google it, right? Google has a first of all, it's a general Google. You just go to the webpage of Google. You can search for it. Google also has a Scholar, Google Scholar, that specifically designed for you to search for papers. Okay? So this is definitely the first source of information, Google. Okay. Secondly, if you know the specific area of your research, right? For example, if in my case, I'm conducting computation biology research, a good source for me to look for this information is PubMed, PubMed. Okay. So, well, you might ask, how do I know I need to go to PubMed? Well, unfortunately, you really need to talk to somebody who's experienced in this area of research, right? So this is why you work with a mentor, so who will be able to really guide you or direct you to these type of resources. Okay, all right. So, well, just to summarize, right? So one general resource that doesn't require any mentor, any expertise information is Google. You can always Google to search for this type of information. And specifically to the area of research, you need to really talk to your mentor, okay, to know what are this area specific sources where you can get these informations. Does it make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you, Professor.
Okay, any other questions?
Yes. When I worked in intelligence work, there's a lot of research and development in there as well. And there is a big initiative post 9/11 to make more interagency fusion happen. And I know so far our whole process has been about, for the REU undergraduate students, has been sort of about pushing or helping us understand the importance of communication and networking. And along with the previous question of it can be difficult to find good information, are there any I guess professional organizations that are entirely just dedicated to fusing this information to get together with? Like I know IEEE exists, but IEEE seems to mostly be remote groups doing their own research and then every so often throughout the calendar year presenting it to each other. Is there something that's more direct and immediate for some kind of collaborative fusion effort other than just that, having a well-developed network of connections?
All right. So the question here is whether there's a collaborative effort that try to fuse this information from different sources. Is it right?
Yes. So like for instance, on the government side of things, there's now in the intelligence community, at least, there's entire organizations that their whole existence is just to collect published reports and information from other groups and communicate that to each other.
I see. Yeah. Well, I would say definitely different agencies, different government agencies have a similar effort. For example, in my case, I'm more familiar with National Institute of Health. So National Institute of Health have multiple such efforts. So that TCGA I mentioned in my talk is one such effort that is solely dedicated to collect data. And then, so there's associated effort under TCGA that also focus on collecting the results, published results specifically from analyzing the data. Okay. So, and this is just one example that NIH has. So their NIH also has a public database. It's called a GEO. It's called let me see. It's Gene Expression Omnibus. Okay, this database collects all sorts of high throughput genomics data, and the NIH has a specific policy which requires any type of research that is funded by NIH to deposit their data in this database before one can publish their results in a journal. Okay. So, and also PubMed, I mentioned about PubMed. So PubMed is a database that collects all publications that concerns biological research. So NIH also has this policy to require any funded research to deposit any of their published paper in PubMed. If this requirement is not met, the funding can be revoked. So it's a pretty strict policy. So as you can see, these type of efforts is really set out to have a centralized location for data, for published results. Well, if you go to PubMed, you see papers from not only biologists, you see papers from engineers, you see papers published in IEEE, you see papers published in machine learning journals. So this is PubMed is if you're conducting biological research, it's a portal that really collects published papers from all different sources that concern public health or biological research. So I can only tell you from my own experiences concerning biological research. I would imagine in other areas there are also such efforts, but it's just I'm not really familiar with. So we luckily in this REU we have faculty members that conduct research in pretty diverse area of research. So you can really talk to them to really ask for such resources and such efforts.
Thank you.
Any other questions?